Welcome to the Leadercast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is leave a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is my buddy, Brad Wise. We have worked together for 16 years and been partners through that whole time. Just in the last month, Brad has decided to go out on his own and start a brand new thing called Wolf House Fables to help people find wonder in their life. I'm super excited for him. He's also the creator of our Spark event at Leadercast, which will premiere here really soon on January 24th. Here's my conversation with my very good friend, Brad. Hi, Brad Wise.
Hello, sir.
So sometimes I interview my friends on here, and other times I don't know people. But I've never known anyone as well as you, my friend. So here we go.
Here we go. Should be fun.
16 years we worked together. I did the math on my phone. Felt like we had a pretty instant connection especially on the creative side, that I kind of been looking for a creative partner my whole life. So it was very exciting to find you. And you usually nod your head when I say that. So I'm going to assume it's true.
Feels true. Yeah. I mean, I think from the start, I remember when you were making your way across country, moving from LA to Cincinnati. And one of the first things you said was like, call me if you have like anything that you need. And you hadn't even started yet. But you just had that spirit from the start of like, we're going to be in this together. And it's just always been that way.
Yeah. And so we worked together one way or another. And then just in the last month, you've launched your own thing, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but tell folks what that is, what the name of it is.
So yeah, the company I started is called Wolf House Fables. And what I'm specializing in is wonder building for courageous teams. There's all this new science around teams that want to come together and be more creative, be more courageous, be more connected with each other. When we have experiences with wonder and awe, that literally rewires our brains and makes us more of all of those things. And so it's using all of the bags of tricks that I've used throughout my whole career of tapping into creativity and getting adults to be kids again, to play together, to create together. That's what I've loved doing my whole life. And so I'm gonna go for it and help teams step into their full creative selves.
I'm excited for you. I really am. This is, it just feels right. And, when there's probably some folks listening that have had really long-term partnerships in business and life. And we've been on the same payroll for 16 years, but I feel like our partnership's still continuing. So Leadercast will continue to work with you and your new company as you can help us help other people find that wonder too. And one of the very first things you're doing with your new company is helping us with our Spark event in January. So could you tell folks a little bit about what Spark is, what it's going to be, what they should expect?
It's premiering here soon, and it comes at the time of the year where we all we have that little bit of courage that we want to start a new goal, start a resolution. We've all been to the gym at the early days of January where it's packed full of people. And we have all these good intentions, and then something that wears off a bit, right? Like maybe that courage or that commitment, whatever happens, it doesn't matter. Like by the time February comes, all of those hopes and dreams that we were excited about start to fade a bit. And so, working with you all, it was just like, well, what can we give the community? Can we give them a tool that keeps that fire going, right? That we have goals that we want to accomplish as a team or individually. We want to get things done. We have, new things that we need and want to accomplish. And so we designed this experience that's kind of, it's a bit of a reflective journey that goes through sort of each stage of bringing an idea or an initiative to life. It follows sort of classic narrative structure that, it taps into what Joseph Campbell identified in the hero's journey, but it's not just that. But it's this idea that there are these 5 stages that you need to walk through, and I called them the 5 elixirs. Elixir is that old-timey story thing where you had to like drink this magical potion in order to transform to go on to the next stage. And so kind of have identified the 5 elixirs along the path of trying something and failing and then getting back on the path and doing it again. And so it's meant to be a tool that you can use right now. you can start your initiative, or if you're in the middle of it. But it's a reflective journey so that you can kind of keep coming back to it, hopefully throughout the whole year, when you're getting stuck and you just need, that little burst, that little spark to keep going.
Cool. And it's totally free for anyone that's on Leadercast 365. Anyone part of that community can access it. If you're not on it, super affordable. Check it out. You can get on there today and access Spark in January. Why don't you give us just a little sneak peek? What maybe one of the elixirs? What's one that we'll be looking at when we do that?
Yeah. Well, the first one is invitation, that you feel this, whether it's sort of a big, huge calling towards something, or if it's just a little nudge that you want to try something. It usually comes from the inside originally, but then there's usually someone that comes along, some type of mentor figure, or could be a partner figure, who comes along and says, hey, what if we did this together? It reminds me actually of when you and I first started together. I had this, I was a graphic designer by trade, but I had this sort of desire to write and tell stories. And then here comes this man from California who says, hey, what if we did big things, like told movies and did this and that? And you're just like, whoa, that feels scary. And usually when you have that feeling of that feels scary, but also that little tiny voice inside of you that says, but maybe you could, that's a good way to start things. And so that's the first elixir, is invitation. There's some harder ones throughout, of like the second one, I believe, is resignation, of when you start on the path and you feel like it's going to just be all gumdrops and candy canes and good times. And then you hit a wall and you start to realize that it's not going to be as easy as you hoped. One of the things I talk about in Spark is how once you start and finish something, there's such power in starting a project and actually finishing it, because then you're building up that muscle that you can say, I know how to start and I know how to finish something. And then it's easier to start the next time. But also at each stage in each elixir, once you've gone through it and you actually bring some new awareness to it, the next time it comes up, it gives you that little bit of hope that you need to get through it, right? Yeah. And so I talk about how, when you reach the stage of that dark night of the soul, where you just feel like all is lost and you were stupid for ever trying, and you almost just feel like silly and ashamed that you had the foolishness to start the project. Once you have some awareness that that's going to happen every single time, and that there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to find a collective path forward with the group of people that you're creating something with, then you're more likely to start a project again. But if you don't ever bring any awareness to each one of these stages, they can catch you off guard every single time and sort of derail you. And I talk about in Spark about how when you start something and you start that journey, there are going to be so many off ramps with huge bright signs that are blinking, like, get off here, come to this rest stop. It's cozy. You don't have to keep going down this path anymore. There's going to be so many times to get off the path. Bringing awareness to each one of those stages, I think, is the first step in continuing the journey.
Love it. Well, I know your story pretty well, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to do this a little differently. You, like you said, studied as a graphic designer, but you ended up at a church producing basically like a big church where you had to do a big event, 52 a year, right? Every week. I'm curious, when you think back of your years at Ginghamsburg Church and Vineyard Church, what do you think is the biggest sort of leadership lesson you learned or you take away, or what do you pull from today that you learned back then?
Yeah. Man, I feel like the lesson that I learned and that I keep learning over and over and over again is this idea that it's not about the end product. It's not about the end of the journey. It's not about, you start a project, whether it's making a movie or Spark or creating a card game, whatever it is. I've made a bunch of things with my friends throughout my career. What I've realized is that it's never actually about that end product. It's always about the process. And for me as a creative, when I'm helping other people, especially as our time that we spent with Rebel Pilgrim and then Boonrise in the agency space before Leadercast, we helped a lot of companies sort of find their story or come up with what their solution should be. And it was always super fun and very kind of easy to hear their problem and to know instantly, here's what I think the solution should be, to like combine those two things. And what I've found is that that's easy to do for someone outside of yourself, and like almost impossible to do that quickly for your own stuff, right? Yeah. And so those lessons that I learned early on in those days are now coming to full fruition with starting this new thing where like, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like and be like, and I want to have the solution, and that can register as a failure because it comes so easy to do that for other people, right? Like I can identify what you should do with your problem. Like here's a solution, but it's harder for yourself to come up with it. And I do feel like that's at the heart of like when I wrote Spark, it's to help process through that it's not going to be this simple solution that you just magically come up with. Like you have to go through the stages, you have to go through the process and drink all of those different elixirs. And so that, you know, that we've read the same books, and we know that with that hero's journey and that narrative arc, like it's not like you just do one where you start your journey and you slay the dragon, you get the treasure, and then boop, you're done. Like it's a spiral that constantly keeps going and going and going. And I do feel like that remembering that I'm not doing any of this to get to the end product. It's to become more like myself. You know, there's a quote from Thelonious Monk that says the genius is the one most like him or herself. And I feel like that only happens through the process of making stuff, right? Like you don't just become a genius like magically. You're maybe born with that genius, but then you got to like go through all of those stages to discover it. You got to be naive enough to anybody that wants to make anything or step out of their comfort zone. Like you got to be naive enough to think that you can like figure it out on your own. Right. And then the joy of figuring out that you can, but there are some folks around you who can help. But like, that's the stuff. Like that's the magic of life. That's the wonder of life, I think.
I think about, I did a TEDx talk on failure like 10 years ago. And I think I honestly believed I'd been through most of my life failures, and I was ready to do the failure talk. And it was just like taunting the universe to make me fail more.
What's funny is, so Mo, when we were recording Spark, Mo, the producer at Leadercast, I was like, Mo, is this registering? Like, is this connecting? And she's just like, yeah, I just don't feel like I've maybe had that big failure yet. And that like makes me a little bit nervous. And I was like, yeah, it's going to come. It's going to come over and over and over again. And
Mo, did you hit record on this? Yeah. Okay. She said yes.
We all have these voices that are in our ear. The judge voice who's telling us like, you're such a, like, who are you? That's terrible. Like just wants to keep our ego in check so that we never leave that safety zone. And then the victim who like wants to just put you in that spot of playing the victim, and bringing awareness to those voices has just been so huge for me. Because once you name them and you sense them, then you can be like, okay, well then this is clearly, I'm entering into an opportunity for growth, right? Because that's ultimately what those little voices are trying to keep us from, is stepping outside of our comfort zone. And so once you kind of get familiar with what they sound like and how they speak to you, then you can, after that awareness, then you can start doing the work of like, all right, so what is the opportunity that I can step into? And I'm not saying anything that everybody listening doesn't know, but man, it's been good to learn for me this summer.
Okay, so so we made some movies together, and turns out we are not famous for making those movies, but we did it. And we did it, and which is a miracle. We made more than one. One that got in theaters around the country, called A Strange Brand of Happy. And we also you wrote several scripts that we pitched around for a long time. So you wrote more movies than we produced. I'm curious about, when you think of that time period, obviously did some pretty intense learning. So when you think about just that part of our career in your life, I'm just curious, any lessons or learnings from that period that you haven't talked about yet that kind of pop into your mind?
When I look back on those days, the lesson that I have is And when you're taking risks and you're following your curiosity of like, and you're answering the question of like, what if we did this? That sense of aliveness is like it's the fuel to get to whatever the next stage is. And I do feel like we did a good job of finding some real joy and some real meaning and some real purpose, like in the moment. I think we had enough big bubbles burst. Like, how many times did we, I remember when we went on to Sony's lot to go pitch one of the movies, and you tell yourself so many stories building up to those moments of like, if this happens, then this will happen. And when that happens, that'll happen. And you can like build this amazing story in your life. And then how quickly it's just like, it pops and it doesn't happen. And we had enough of those sort of just like, crap, this isn't going like what we thought we would, and being just fully alive and present and creating something together. There's nothing better than that. And so it's not, even when the thing doesn't turn out exactly like you hoped for, like you still had those moments of pure aliveness and pure wonder. And what's the point of life if that's not it, right? Like, I mean, feeling that way, I think that's everything. That's what I've been chasing my whole life.
You've been able to verbalize clarity around that, I feel like, just really in the last year of seeing that. You always knew that was that, but even the word wonder is kind of a new word to you. So
yeah, I mean, so what happened was actually this past summer in 2023, I stumbled upon this book by a professor out of Berkeley named Dr. Keltner, and he wrote a book called Awe, the Everyday or the New Science of Everyday Wonder. And I was reading this book, and it felt like here was a scientist he worked for the Greater Good Science Center out in Berkeley, and it felt like the scientific proof behind like everything I've been doing and have been into my entire life. There's all of these types of wonder, nature, stories, music, art, that when we experience that, it really does, it rewires our brains. Like, it's evolutionary to be more connected and connected to each other and connected to something bigger, to be more creative and curious. So I'm reading this book and I'm just like, this is it. Like, this is what I've been doing since I was a little kid, like marching into the woods to go find the cabin where we could, go steal these tools to build a fort. Like, wonder's been it from the jump for me. And I really do feel like something powerful happens when we come alive and tap into these. I think we have some superpowers from when we were kids that maybe some of us have held on to or we remember, but like, we can tap into those now and bring them to life in a way that's gonna, I don't know, keep us on the path of becoming fully alive. And that only happens, I think, when we're tapping into wonder, and then we're doing it sort of with a group of folks.
Can you talk a little bit about the visioning exercise that you did and that I think led you where you are, and then told me to do, and I listened to you 3 months later, and it was very super helpful for me. And I've led 5 different groups through it since you brought it to me. And talk a little bit about Ari and the exercise and how that's got you where you are.
Ari, who's actually going to be a speaker at Leadercast Go, he's written all these books. He started Zingerman's Deli up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And if you're from that region, Zingerman's is like an institution. And this dude he calls himself a lapsed anarchist, and he studied Russian history at U of M. And the way that he writes books, and I told him this later when I got to meet him, I was like, you're like a hip hop artist. The way that you sample all of he's like read everything, and he just samples and pulls quotes from all these different people and makes this new track in the form of these leadership books. And so he has this visioning process that he's built his entire, huge company doing. They write a 10 to 20 year vision. And so he leads you through this process in this pamphlet that I got. It's one of his secrets. And you write, he calls it a hot pen technique. You start writing and you can't edit anything, and you can't take your pen off the paper. You can't take your fingers off the keyboards. And you're just writing I did it 5 years in the future, and he has you before you start writing, you kind of like conjure up some of the wins that you've had in your past of like what's been good, where have you operated out of your sort of, he doesn't use this language, but zone of creative genius, and like you do that to prime the pump, and then you start the process by saying, for me, I did it. It was like it's May 19th, 2028. And life is better than I ever could have imagined. And then you just start writing like it's present day, like it's everything's happening right now or has already happened in the past 5 years. Ari talks about how like businesses shouldn't just exist to make money. Like business exists to make you who you are, to bring, it's a way to bring you out of yourself, right? And so he thinks the business should be a work of art. And I just really resonated with everything that he said. And the vision gives you this like direction, and you don't know how it sounds woo woo and everything, but it's not really. Like you're just the hot pen technique and the right, it brings up the stuff that's been in you for a long time. And so like what came out for me was like, oh yeah, that forgot about that. I forgot that I've been, and it brings up all the stuff onto the paper where then you can just start to look at it, and you look back on your whole career and you're like, that does make sense of why I want to go where I want to go in 5 years. Like everything's been building towards it, right? Yeah. I think that's what the visioning process does. It allows you to like stop editing yourself. I literally had to close my eyes and type at this coffee shop because all I wanted to do was edit it. I don't know if you felt that way when you did yours, but like when you can turn off that sort of editor mindset and that fear voice and all of that stuff that wants to say like, you can't, and you actually just let it come on out, and you don't worry about how it looks. What you really want, I do think, comes out, and then you have this thing to start walking toward. And so I think there's a line in that pamphlet where it's just like, if you know how to bring your vision to life instantly, then it's not big enough. Like It's not.
So before you go, any like hacks or tricks or exercises or whatever, if you just are leading something, or you just kind of feel stuck, or you're lacking, you want that wonder, but you don't have it. Any practical advice that's something folks can do?
Yeah. Well, do you want to try something real quick?
I think so.
I think so. Well, there's a reflection exercise that I like to do with groups that where you root sort of your driving beliefs and values to maybe the origin story of where they came from. And I believe that when we can do that, when we have a story attached to the things that we value and believe in, it becomes more real, and we can step into that. And even then that story can become a tool that we use for collaboration. It's something that we can give away to people, we can tell. And so like, if we did it real quick with you, like if you were, I'm not going to make you close your eyes and take deep breaths like I do with groups. But if you wanted to, you could just take a quick deep breath in and out. And if you're listening, you can join in. But if you just think back to when you were a kid, younger, and if it's a safe spot to think about your childhood home, and you try to imagine that front door, and then even deeper, if you can try to imagine, did you ever go on a road trip as a kid? Did you ever pile into a car and travel someplace new? And then whatever that destination was, whether you went to a beach or the mountains or you went camping, like, can you remember a moment where you just like, you really totally came into experience with something that you couldn't fully explain? It felt big. It felt new. That first time seeing the ocean, just how big it is. The first time putting your hand in a cold mountain stream and realizing that water comes from the mountains. Whatever it was, just some picture where you just were like, whoa, this is bigger than my world. Does anything come to mind for you, Joe, when I had you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I was jumping around lots of, as you talked. I think the most surprising one was when the first time I went to a Reds game, Riverfront Stadium, Cause I did I could see the first time at the beach and all that, but how loud it was, and just, I was from a little town in Kentucky. I'd never seen more than 300 people in my life,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
there's 50,000 people, and it's like, so that hugeness, it's like a weird Grand Canyon of people, right?
Yeah. So then what the exercise you could do, text me after you do this, like after this, is reflect, like write down, like what did I love about that experience? And like write about that for a while, and then ask yourself, well, why did I love that? Like not just the what, but like, why did I love that? Mm-hmm. And then from there, craft a belief statement from those answers, and it'll come. Like you'll just be like, I believe. And then from there, it will help point you toward what your values are. And there's probably 3 to 12 of those throughout your whole life, that like everything you do now is built on those beliefs and those values. And I really think there's magic and power in trying to identify those moments where we felt totally alive, and like that sense of wonder, and like, whoa, good things happen. So that would be my long answer to that question of like, what's something somebody could try.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, like if you just did that exercise, or you're going to after you listen to this, I would love to hear what belief statement that you can generate out of that experience. So email me, brad@wolfhousefables.com.
One of the greatest honors of my life is the way the universe threw us together. And I think our hearts and minds and souls are connected forever. And nothing's ever going to change that. I'm your biggest fan. And I feel like I might have got 18 months of mentoring you, and then the script at least was even from then on. I feel like you've been a mentor to me in so many ways, and it's been just a blast to watch you become who you are. So thanks for being my friend, and we got this. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, man. It's been a blast.
Hey, so if people want to connect with what you're doing now, what's the best way that they can help them find some wonder in their life?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to email me, it's brad@wolfhousefables.com. I'm certainly out on the LinkedIn as well. But yeah, I would love if anybody if they know they're feeling like, man, my team feels stuck. I don't know what to do though. Like, I don't either, but the 9-year-old in you does. Yeah. And that my job is to unlock that 9-year-old and create a sandbox for you to unfold. That's what I'm here for.
All right, man. Thanks. I'll see you around.
See you, man.